again, the convergence of blockchain and AI. Now, with AI, you can expect within this year, we're going to see deepfake so real. You cannot tell the difference. People watching this on live stream, they will not know what's in here.
We're not here.
We're having
We're not here. We're not here.
We're having dinner somewhere else. So to counter that, you need some form of digital watermark. That is actually a cryptographic evidence
that you're
this
real.
is real.
Yeah.
It's my signature, his signature.
Who puts that? The tech companies? By the way, they're so excited at the back. They're trading crypto on the back of Larry's comments.
It's all your fault. No, we control our private key. It's going to be private public key.
It'll be personal.
We'll have control.
It's going to be like your irises, your fingerprints. It'll be a digital.
But it's stored on blockchain.
Yeah.
Witnessed by the global population.
Everybody knows.
Cannot be faked.
Yeah. But does this change everything for just capital markets?
It will. Yeah. I mean, my gosh, if we could tokenize bonds and stocks tomorrow, one of the great things that BlackRock is being accused of is how much vote we have. I wouldn't vote anymore because we would be able, through tokenization, to know the owner of record instantaneous, and each owner of record will do their proxy voting. I would love that outcome. No, but it would democratize investing in all ways that we can't imagine.
Even political systems, how you vote in a country can be changed by that.
And do you think that, again, the Trump administration will accelerate that?
I think they're moving that direction. How far they actually will go remains to be seen.
But if you do have a digital validator, like your fingerprints or your irises, I mean, you could tokenize voting. You could do everything. And so it will change how we think and how we live and what we do. And
we've been talking to some Southeast Asian governments, including Malaysia, Thailand, Philippines, Indonesia. All of them historically have the populations who are trading black market, bitcoins and what have you. But now the governments are realizing U.S. is driving a global policy shift. So they're now doing something very clever. They're saying, you know what, we're going to issue a new form of digital ID to every single citizen. Along with that is a digital wallet.
Which Brazil and India has already done.
You're both so far.
Mr. President?
Hi, thank you very much.
Okay, by the way, we're on a beautiful Air Force One. Not a bad plane.
Not bad at all. Not bad at all. It's a beautiful plane, and we're doing a lot of business. We have a lot of good things happening.
Okay, so this is an amazing week so far. You get a deal with China. I'm just going to list it, and then we can get into detail. India and Pakistan played a big role. Hopefully, the peace stands. You slash prescription drug prices. Most favored nation, the American people will get first dibs in terms of prices. The last American hostage has been released. We're on this trip to Saudi Arabia, Qatar. There's not much going on in your life, is there?
Well, I've been busy, but I've enjoyed it because we're getting things accomplished. We're getting things done. You know, you can have times when you're working very hard and not getting things done. That happens too. But we're getting a lot done. I don't think there's ever been a little period like this with the potential nuclear war, and two countries, they have very good leaders, people I know very well, and you know, it was a very important process. We got involved with India and Pakistan.
You got involved early. Can you give us a little insight what happened behind the scenes? How were you able?
Well, I didn't like what was happening, and you hear, you know, they're two very strongly nuclear countries, very, very powerful amount of nuclear too, serious stuff. And if that ever started, boy, that's the beginning of something that could be really bad. Even a minimal, you could have millions of people killed. And with one shot, two shots, and I just thought it was something we could get involved in. And I did a good job, Marco did a good job, and JD did a good job. We sort of were a team, and we, I think, convinced them to let's have peace and let's go and make trade deals. If we can make trade deals, we like that much better than nuclear weapons. And that was a great thing, and we did a good job with the Houthis, stopped with the shooting of the ships. They like shooting
Is that
ships
a done
down.
deal? Because there's been conflicting reports that some of their leaders are saying, oh, that's not true.
Well, it is with respect to America. Now, you can't always count on somebody necessarily telling the truth, but their surrogates were very strong, very powerful, very good relationship with them. They're tough fighters. They can take a lot of punishment, but with respect to America, they say it's true. So we'll see. You'll know. You'll be the first to know, won't you?
I follow the news closely. I read everything. I think the biggest surprise from this weekend, it was a week ago Friday, where I saw that China announced, quote, if the president is serious, we will be willing to negotiate with him. And Scott Bessent, your Treasury Secretary, met with their representatives in Geneva on Saturday. On Monday, you're announcing a trade, well, actually on Sunday, you announced a deal with China.
Yeah.
How did that happen that quickly?
Well, they met on Saturday and Sunday, and they had a deal pretty much from the beginning. It was the concept of a deal. And, one of the things that, as you know, it's sort of a 90-day deal as we negotiate other aspects. But one of the things I think that could be most exciting for us and also for China is that we're trying to open up China. Because, as you know, many years ago we opened up the USA. Now it's time for China to open up, and that's part of our deal. And we're going to open up China. To me, that's the most exciting part. But, yeah, we made a deal. The relationship is very good. I've always had a good relationship with President Xi. It was interrupted because of COVID, obviously. But outside of that, I've always had a great relationship, a lot of respect for him. And we'll see how that all works out. But we have the confines of a very, very strong deal with China. But the most exciting part of the deal, it was mentioned, but we don't talk about it yet. That's the opening up of China to U.S. business. And that would be like opening up a whole new world, and I think it would be even better for China. So I think we'll be able to make that deal, I hope.
At any point, do you foresee yourself dealing directly with President Xi on the final details of this deal?
Yeah, I could see that. I mean, I'm not sure that it'll be necessary, but that happened with the UK. We were close to a deal, but we needed 1 point or 2 points on pork and ethanol, okay, two very different subjects. And I called up the Prime Minister, who's an excellent man, Keir, excellent man, and within about 3 minutes it was over. We made the deal. It was a good deal for everybody. And we have a lot of deals now. We have a lot of trade deals that I'd say virtually everybody wants to make a deal.
When I first saw you, and thank you for letting us cover this, report on this from Air Force One. When I first saw you, I think you were more excited, or you were excited about the China deal, but prescription drugs, which has been very, very painful for a lot of Americans. 80% of medications are created in America, and then we end up paying more for those medications. Foreign countries do not pay as much as we do. You said that is over. Can you explain why this is such a big deal?
Well, for many years we were taken advantage of by other countries and the drug companies, but I blame the other countries in a way more, the European Union, etc. They were very nasty and very tough to the drug companies, and they would give them a very low price for drug costs in the European nations. And when that price was given, that was it. They wouldn't negotiate. They said, let America pay for the difference. And this happened all over the world with other countries. And we had stupid people leading us, and especially over the last 4 years. And they wouldn't do anything about it. And it turned out that we were paying, and sometimes you saw 10 times more for the same drug. Same drug, same company, same plant where they make it, laboratory. And it got to a point where I said, we're not going to do this anymore. The pharmaceutical industry is very powerful, and probably the most powerful, considered the most powerful lobby. And the Democrats were making it impossible to lower drug prices. They knew what they were doing. And I instituted a most favored nations provision or concept where we're going to pay whatever the lowest country pays in the world. So if it's the UK, which pays very low, in any country, it could be any country, whatever the lowest price is. And The drug companies have accepted it. Everybody accepts it. But the Democrats never wanted to play ball. They never wanted to do anything. It's the Democrats' fault that people were being ripped off for years and years. And now I hear Democrats saying, oh, well, we're going to now go for the bill. It's going to be very hard for them not to approve the big, beautiful bill that we're doing. We're doing the biggest tax cuts in the history of our country, because people are going to be getting a 50 to a 90% reduction in drug prices, not a 0.5%. I remember when I would fight so hard to get a 0.5 point, and I actually had it down a 0.5 point for 1 year, and I was so proud of myself because that never happened before. It was always going up. Drugs only went in one direction, that's up. And now, after studying the industry, it's a very complex industry, but I figured it out, and I said it's not going to happen. But the Democrats fought very hard to keep the prices of drugs very, very high. They really are to blame for this because they should have done something about it. And when the Republicans went with requests, they said, we're not going to approve it. And now we have a unified Republican Party. But I think the Democrats are going to approve this bill, too, because how are they going to reject a 60, 70, 80% drug cut? I don't think they can.
I think it's going to be huge. The fact that these drugs the creation of these drugs, I mean, these companies have to go through a very arduous process to get approval by the government. They spend billions of dollars, and put aside whether or not, quote, people demonize Big Pharma. That's separate and apart. However, we usually end up creating them, and then we end up paying 10 times more, which is crazy.
Well, they used to use that, if I could interrupt, they used to use that as a reason why we were paying 5 and 10 times more than other countries. They say because of research and development. And I'd always say, well, what about you doing research and development for the rest of the world too? Why are we paying for 100%? So we paid 100% for research and development, which, along with other things, believe it or not, raised the price to a point where you were 5 to 10 times higher than the rest of the world. And I told the story today. It was well received. A friend of mine who's slightly overweight, to put it mildly, went to a drugstore in London, and he was able to get one of the fat shots. I call it the fat shots, the jabs, that you lose weight.
By the way, a lot of people laugh at that. Some people get offended by. I don't get offended by anything.
I'm just glad I didn't use his name. He's actually a very rich guy. He's a very successful guy.
He's glad you didn't use his name.
No, he's very happy.
Oh.
He knows exactly who I was talking about. He called. He said, that was interesting. He said he was very concerned that I might use his name. It might slip. No, he doesn't have to worry. But he went to London, and he bought this...
Ozempic, Wegovy, one of those?
I guess, yeah. I'm not sure which one. But he bought one of them, maybe Ozempic. And he bought it, and he called me. He said, hey, strange thing happened. I just bought a drug. Same company, same plant, same everything. Everything was the same. In one case, I paid, in New York, $1,300, and in London, I'm paying $88. He said, what's going on? Now, he knew nothing. He's a very smart guy. He's a very rich guy. His big problem is he's seriously overweight. But I don't think the drug worked, okay, to be honest with you. But it makes him feel good anyway. But so what happens is he said to me, I paid $88, and in New York, I get it for $1,300 or something. A massive difference. And I said, that's right, the drug laws are very screwed up, and I'm doing something about it. He said, you better, because this is crazy. He didn't understand it, but he didn't understand why. And now he understands why, because he watched our news conference this morning, holding his breath, right? But he watched his news conference. But think of it. So he goes to London, and a lot of people go shopping in nearby or even far away countries, and they'll go away once a month or once a week or something. If it's a nearby country, they'll go right across the border and they'll buy the same drug for 1/10 the price as we pay in the United States. And a part of it is the power of the drug companies, which is a very big power. But I think a bigger part is the ruthlessness of other nations to screw the United States of America. And the European Union would be the top because they represent a lot of countries, and they're brutal, according to the drug companies told me this, they're brutal in negotiations. They say, this is what we're going to pay. We're not going to pay any more. And if you need more, you get it from America. And so they get a low price, and we get a high price. And I ended it. And this has been going on for many years, but nobody realized that you could do. I think I figured out the system. very complex chain of events take place, and I ended it. And I have to say, the drug companies were great. They were great. They said, look, it's time. They actually looked, they said, it's time.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else. Welcome back to Hannity. We are in Doha, Qatar, and here is part two of my exclusive interview with President Trump aboard Air Force One. We covered a lot of territory. Take a look.
There are many legs to your economic plan that you're laying out. One are the trade deals. Second is tax cuts permanent, no tax tips, no tax Social Security,
Right.
no tax overtime. Another leg would be energy.
Interest deduction on cars. Remember that.
That's
so it's
big.
No tax on tips, no tax on Social Security benefits for seniors, which is so great. Think of it. And no tax on overtime. But there's a fourth leg that I think is really important of that, where middle-income people, but any people, if you buy a car made in America, I'm not interested if it's made anywhere else. I couldn't care less. But if it's made in America, you get, and you borrow money to buy the car, which I guess 80% of the people do, you get a tax deduction on your interest payments. That's a big deal. That's never happened before.
A big deal for people that are buying cars, but
That's a huge game changer for the car industry too.
huge, I think. One part that you can't control, although maybe you really can because you have such influence with the Republican Party, is the one big beautiful bill. You put out a big statement on that today. And how confident are you, having spent time with Majority Leader Thune, Speaker of the House Johnson?
First of all, Johnson and Thune have been unbelievable. They've done a great job. Their soul is into this, their whole heart and soul. And they're working so hard. And it's always tough when you have a very small, we have a majority, but it's in the Senate 3 votes, and in the Republican, in Congress, it's 7. Now, it was 1 for a period of time. We won some elections in the meantime, but it was actually 1. So now it's 7. And I would say this, even before this big drug and, if you take a look at the cuts that I announced today, if you take a look at the pharmaceutical and drug cuts, they're so massive that I think a lot of Democrats have to vote for the bill, number one. Number two, even if I didn't do this today, even if there was no such thing as these, 50 to 90% cuts, I mean, think of it, where we're buying, you're selling drugs in other countries for 5 times more than it costs in the United States. How horrible that is. Anyway, but that's going to be a thing of the past.
Some of them are they're cancer drugs too sometimes.
Yeah, everything. It's very unfair. Very unfair to people. They have cancer and they don't have much money. They have enough money to get through this, but then they end up going bankrupt. People were getting themselves fixed up or not getting fixed up. Either way, and still they were going bankrupt all over the place because they couldn't afford the drugs. But if they lived in a different country, they would have paid just a fraction. Think of how horrible that is. Anyway, so I fixed that. Nobody thought it was fixable, and I fixed it. But even without that, I think we would have gotten the bill passed. With it, I think a lot of Democrats have to vote. I saw that a couple of Democrats said, I'd like to be in charge of, I don't know if you saw that. You have a couple of people that go on your show that I assume are moderate Democrats without mentioning names. And both of them said, I don't know about you, but I think I'm going to be voting for this bill. I think a lot of Democrats are going to be forced to vote for the bill because, you add this new element that if this bill passes, you're going to get a 50 to 90% reduction in prescription drugs and pharmaceuticals. When you add that in, how does a Democrat not vote? I don't think they can win an election if they don't vote for it. But even if you don't include it, I think that the Republicans are very unified and something would happen where they will get this vote.
You know what?
I think it's imperative they vote.
But look at the Democratic Party. Look at the leadership that's emerged. Jasmine Crockett, AOC, the Squad, Grandpa Bernie, they seem to be the most.
Well, look at Schumer. He turned out to be a Palestinian. I knew him right at the beginning. And I tell you what, Schumer has turned out, we call him the Palestinian senator, the senator from Palestine. No, Chuck Schumer is very disappointed.
Is he afraid to go against that radical base?
I think he's afraid, yeah. I watch him. He's lost his confidence totally. I just watched Chuck Schumer. I've known him so long, and he's in the other party, but, I've known the guy so long. He's totally lost his confidence.
It's interesting. We're talking about the radicalism of the left, and what's really fascinating is you take up a lot of space in their head. And it's funny, you said, how could they possibly vote against lower prescription drug costs? But in the U.S. Senate, the Democrats were championing the right of men to play women's sports. They've been the party of fighting for the rights of illegals, even Tren de Aragua, Abrego Garcia, etc. They're the party that thinks it's a constitutional crisis, that you and Doge have had nearly $200 billion in waste, fraud, and abuse. They think that's a constitutional crisis. So you're asking, how could they be that extreme? Aren't they that extreme?
Well, not all of them. I think you have a lot of them that they don't know where they are right now. I think they don't know what to do, like men playing in women's sports. I saw a guy that I know, a good guy, Democrat. He's trying to justify, 2 days ago on television, he's being hammered, and he's trying to justify men playing in women's sports, and it's sad. I wanted to call him and say, you better get off that subject. That's not an 80-20, that's about a 97-3, okay? If they talk about, the famous, they always say it's 80-20. What's not, a lot of these things are not 80-20, like transgender for everybody. Let's have transgender for everybody, your kids, everybody. That's not an 80-20. They always say that's 80-20. That's 99-1, I would say. So, look, in one way, I don't like talking about it because I don't want to talk them out of it, because it would be harder to beat them if they were normal on things. It shows that they're almost insane. And they do suffer from Trump derangement syndrome at a high level. And I guess I'm honored by that. But I'll say this, look, we had an election. You were so wonderful to me. You were really an amazing professional. You did it for the right reason. You didn't do it for the wrong reason. But you were so professional. And we won every swing state. We won the popular vote by a lot. We won everything. We won a thing called, that people don't like, districts. So in the country, you have districts, thousands of districts. We got 2,750 districts versus 525 districts. Think of that. That's why when you look at a map, it's actually a very important stat. When you look at a map, the map shows it's practically all red, the Republican Party. And this is a big party. We won, look how well we did with the auto workers. We won the Teamsters. The Teamsters were big for us. The unions were big. The non-unions were big. The right to work was massive. But the unions, we won unions all over the place. And we basically won workers. We also won people of common sense. Rich people, poor people, middle-income people. We won sort of everybody. If you take a look at the stats, we did great with Hispanic. The Hispanic people came to us like nobody's ever seen before.
Don't you think the Republican Party is now the party of working men and women?
I do.
When you put out the threat of tariffs, it was interesting. Between countries and companies, and I would scroll the list on my TV show, pledging $8 trillion, trillion with a T, in manufacturing.
Yeah, more.
Chips, cars, pharmaceuticals, they're going to manufacture back in this country. That was just the threat of tariffs. Now the deals are beginning to follow.
So we're here for really 2 months, because it's 3.5, but you got to give me a month to get ready, make the Oval Office a little more beautiful and things like that we're doing, right? But so we're really here, let's say actively, for 2 months. So in 2 months we have probably over $10 trillion committed, $10 trillion, whereas most presidents wouldn't have $1 trillion over the course of the entire presidency. And if you look at this poor soul, this lost soul from the last presidency, and I say that because he was a very mean person. They went after our people, including me. But he was a very mean person. He was not a smart person. In fact, if you go back 30 years ago, he wasn't a smart person. You go back to prime time with him, he wasn't a smart person. But he was a very mean person. Joe Biden's a very mean person. People don't understand that. They've ruined lives. They've ruined families. They've ruined so many people. They could have ruined me. They tried to ruin me. But we're now in Air Force One flying nicely to the Middle East, right? But they tried to ruin me. But some people weren't able to fight back. Their families have been destroyed. And the level, he knew what was going on, too.
And coming up, more of my exclusive interview with President Trump aboard Air Force One. As we continue our coverage from Doha, we are in Qatar. Stay with us.
Welcome back to Abu Dhabi, Mr. President. Thanks for the time.
Thank you.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey,
Congrats
click
on
here.
becoming a grandfather for the
Yes,
11th time.
Most importantly.
Tiffany, baby Alexander.
They're a really good couple, great couple, I think. And the baby is perfect. I'll let you know about it in 21 years. But the baby is good, so we're happy about that. I look forward to seeing the baby.
Seeing you with those grandkids. This is a big trip. This is seen, especially in this region, as a major, major success with the interaction between each one of these countries. How do you see it today as you wrap it up?
Well, I always considered it to be a very important region. I know all three leaders, as you could see, very well. In all three cases, I knew them long before I ran for politics, which is sort of something. It makes it a little bit more special. They're great people. The three of them, they're great people. And it's a great region, but it was never treated properly, and it was certainly not treated well by Biden, who didn't know he was alive, frankly, so, you know, you can understand that. But he was not, they didn't treat this group well. And I think they were being, and I guess you know, because you've reported on it, they were being coaxed very strongly by China, because that solves China's fuel problem forever. And it wasn't their preference, but they were on their way. They were going to China, and that was going to be their parent, and that's not happening anymore.
Do you think you've shifted the paradigm on that?
No, I don't think. I know. We are as close. We're closer now to them than ever before. You could see the relationship. You could get a body expert and pay them a lot of money, and they could tell you. No, there's just a relationship that I have with all three that's just, you know, very extraordinary. I was even saying, you know, I mean, we're like so friendly. Not a normal situation where you're okay with a leader or whatever. But this is a very important region. This is the energy capital of the world. They have, you know, massive amounts of energy and other things. They've invested wisely. And they're looking to do other things. I guess in Saudi Arabia, they said in another couple of years, there'll be more than 50% other businesses represent more than 50% of the take. And it's pretty amazing what all of them have done.
You have a massive amount of business investment coming back to the U.S.
Right.
And they're still adding it up
Which,
in
by
each
the way,
country.
most importantly, that's why I came here. I didn't come here to say, gee, you guys are rich and you have a lot of oil. You know, they have a lot of money, and I want them to spend the money in the United States. And we set records. There's never been a trip like this by any president or anybody ever before. And I'd ask them, how about doubling it up? Okay. Oh, I should have asked for more, because they said, okay. They're good people, and they love our country. And look, they have great danger because of Iran. That's their primary danger. And that makes them vulnerable. But I don't see them as being vulnerable, because I think we have the greatest military in the world. And we're adding to it now at levels that nobody's ever seen. We're going to build the Iron Dome. We deserve an Iron Dome. You know, see, we call it two names. So I was going to call it the Iron Dome because that's the name everyone has heard of for years. But to me, it was old-fashioned. So we changed it recently to the Golden Dome, the beautiful Golden Dome. And
Matches
Ronald
the golden
Reagan,
age.
you know, Ronald Reagan wanted that many years ago, and he was right, except you didn't have anywhere near the technology.
I want to talk about Israel. I mean, the first trip in the first administration, when you came over to the Middle East, you did do a stop in Israel on the way back. not doing it this time. Obviously, the Israel-Hamas and what's happening in Gaza is driving a lot. How do you see that? Are you frustrated at all with Prime Minister Netanyahu?
No, look, he's got a tough situation. You have to remember there was an October 7th that everyone forgets. It was one of the most violent days in the history of the world, not the Middle East, the world, when you look at the tapes. And the tapes are there for everyone to see. So he has that problem. That problem should have never happened. Now, if I were president, that problem wouldn't have happened because Iran had no money. They were stone cold broke, and they weren't giving money to Hamas. In fact, I remember in your show, like a year before that, you were saying, there's no money for Hezbollah, Hamas. There's like 28 different groups.
Houthis.
The Houthis. But they have 28 groups that we know of. And none of them, they were all breaking up because there was no money. And then Biden came along, he took off all the sanctions on Iran. I mean, I put sanctions that were so strong. Anybody that did business with Iran could not do business with the United States. So everybody took a pass, including China. Biden came in, he just let everyone go by, and they became, you know, they have over $300 billion today.
So how do you get to a solution there?
Oh, we'll get 100%.
You think so?
Well, we're going to have a solution one way or the other. It's either going to be violent or not violent. And I far prefer nonviolent. I know so many Iranians from New York, from Washington, from different places. These are great people. You know, you have to view them as people. And I don't want it to be a violent thing, but they're not going to have a nuclear weapon.
But you said it was close the other day. You said it was close to a deal.
I think it's close. I think,
so does that mean that they're going to
make
enrich at any level, like a civilian level?
No, I think they want to make a deal. You know, you say to yourself, they have massive oil, by the way. They have oil that lasts for 300 years. They have a lot of oil. People don't realize they're one of the biggest in the world. And it's very good oil, meaning it's pure, perfect stuff. They don't have to, you know, spend a fortune on gases and energy in order to melt the rock and everything. They have pure, unadulterated, good oil. And you say, why does somebody that has that kind of oil, other than being politically correct, but when you have unlimited amounts of oil and gas, why are you putting up, you know, why do you need civil nuclear? I just don't see it.
But I mean, are you going to call for it all?
And I think nuclear is fine. I think nuclear is fine for civil if you have a country with no oil. But if you're sitting on one of the largest piles of oil in the world, why are you talking about putting up nuclear civil? I call it nuclear civil.
And so Bibi Netanyahu is not convinced that a deal would be good for the region. Is that fair to say?
I think I can say that Bibi, he's an angry man. And he should be because of October 7th. And he's been hurt badly by that. But in another way, he's been sort of helped because I think he's fought hard and bravely.
And you think the Israel-Hamas, the situation in Gaza is going to come to an end soon?
Gaza's a nasty place. It's been that way for years. I think it should become a free zone. You know, freedom. I call it a freedom zone. It should become a freedom zone. It doesn't work. Every 10 years, they go back. They have Hamas. They have everybody's being killed all over the place. I mean, you ever see? You talk about crime stats. It's a nasty place.
Are these people, these countries that you were just visiting, are they going to have to be a part of the solution?
Well, they would be. They would be. I spoke to all three of them. They would absolutely be. I mean, they're really rich and really, really, really even more than rich. They're good people, and they would help. And so money's not even the problem.
You got to get countries to say yes. To take them.
Look, these are people that want to be in the Middle East. They really want to be in the Middle East. They love the Middle East. I see that. There's a spirit for the Middle East. They didn't have to go to Sweden, Germany, these different countries. They could have been home in the Middle East if somebody had the brains to build beautiful communities. You know, 1.9 million is a lot of people, but it's not a lot of people, relatively.
You know, you had a couple of foreign policy successes even right before this trip. You picked up the phone and called two nuclear powers, India and Pakistan, and you got them to step back from the brink. That was a success as you got on the plane heading over here.
A bigger success than I'll ever be given credit for. Those are major nuclear powers. Those are not like a little bit. And they were angry. And the next phase was probably, did you see where it was getting, it was tit for tat. And it was getting deeper and more missiles. Everyone was stronger, to a point where the next one's going to be, you know what, the N-word. You know what the N-word is, right?
Nuclear.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for the clarification.
I figured you'd want to clean that up. No, it's the N-word. That's a very nasty word, right? In a lot of ways. The N-word used in a nuclear sense, that's the worst thing that can happen. And I think they were very close. The hatred was great. And I said, we're going to talk about trade. We're going to do a lot of trade. Don't forget, Iran wants to make a deal with us badly for a lot of reasons. But when you look at India, they are calling, Iran wants to trade with us, okay, if you can believe that. And I'm okay with it. I'm using trade to settle scores and to make peace. But I've told Iran, we make a deal, you're going to be very happy. But more than anything, I've told Iran very simply, because I heard somebody making my case last night on television. I didn't like it, because they were saying, there's plenty of time. There's not plenty of time. There's not plenty of time.
You feel urgency.
Well, they're not going to have a nuclear weapon, and eventually they'll have a nuclear weapon, and then the discussion becomes a much different one. But in the case of India, India wants, they're one of the highest taxed or tariff nations in the world. They make it almost impossible to do business. Do you know that they're willing to cut 100% of their tariffs for the United States because of what I did? Is that deal coming soon? Yeah, that'll come soon. I'm in no rush. Look, everybody wants to make a deal with us.
So South Korea.
South Korea wants to make a deal with
India,
us, everybody. But Japan. I'm not going to make deals with everybody. I'm just going to set the limit. I'll make some deals. And then I'm just because you can't meet with that many people. I've got 150 countries that want to make deals. You have a lot of countries.
The market was really happy with the China situation and the sit down.
They were.
With the Treasury Secretary.
If I didn't do that deal with China, I think China would have broken apart.
Not us, them.
We weren't going to break. We're not going to break. They would have broken apart. Our country has a lot of spirit. And you know why? Because of November 5th. Because our country has spirit again.
The other foreign policy shift was this embrace of Syria. You met with the Syrian president, who has a shady past of being tied to Al-Qaeda and the al-Nusra Front in Syria, but you see promise there.
Well, before I talk about that, just one word.
Yeah.
Also Pakistan. Great conversations with Pakistan. We can't forget them. And because it does take two to tango. And with India, I felt very certain. And with Pakistan, I also talked about trade. Oh, they would love to trade. They would love to trade. They're brilliant people. They make incredible products. And we don't do much trading with them. And yet I have a good relationship with a lot of people that you wouldn't believe. But I stopped that war. That was going to be a nuclear war, I think, or close, very close. You were right there.
Yeah.
And now everyone's happy. In fact, I told my people, call them up. Let's start trading immediately, because I'm a man of my word. Now, when you get to Syria, so I did something with Syria because the future king, and you have a wonderful king right now. He's an older man. He's also a friend of mine, and he's 100% sharp. He's great. And he's got a great son, the Crown Prince, and he has actually many titles. He's Prime Minister, he's Crown Prince, and he's doing a great job running it. But he called me, and he spoke to me, and he said, could you do me a favor? Could you, and do the world a favor, could you take the sanctions off Syria? Because the only way they're going to have a chance, the sanctions are crippling, really biting. Well, that's what I did with Iran, and they came to a point where they were bust. Could you take the sanctions off? I hadn't thought about it much, and he said it in a way that was, he's got a great heart. He said, they can't make it with those sanctions. I said, let's give them a chance. I met the leader. I met the new leader, and handsome guy, by the way, young, handsome. And I said, you have quite a past. Got a tough past. But when you think about it, are you going to put a choir boy in that position? I don't think so. It's going to be a little bit tough. It's a tough part of the world. So you're willing to
give him a shot?
The word they say, it's a nasty neighborhood. It's a rough neighborhood.
Yeah.
And I thought he was really, I thought he was terrific. He was so thankful about the sanctions. because he knew he's not going to be able to bust through.
So maybe it'll be a turn there. We'll
I think
see.
I think he has a real chance. He's a strong guy. He's done some pretty tough things.
A lot of the coverage here was about your speech in Saudi Arabia
Yeah.
and some of those things that you said about trusting these countries to make their own decisions, and we're not trying to make it a mirror image of ourselves. You know, big foreign policy
we
thoughts.
have our own problems.
Yeah.
You know?
But a lot of the coverage back home was about this donation of the Qatar Boeing jet. And I've heard you talk about it.
You know, until you bring this up now, I haven't heard about it for 3 days.
I know, but I mean, I'm just
I
telling
mean,
you
we
back
could talk
home.
about it again. You ready?
Briefly.
You ready?
No, I heard all the answers.
Well, no, but your audience has to hear the answers. Yeah.
They're giving it to the Defense Department.
To be very simple.
Yeah.
They're giving it to the United States Air Force / Defense Department of the United States. They're not giving it to me. I made a good deal. We need a plane for a couple of years before we get the other ones because Boeing is very late. Boeing is sadly.
Did you talk to the CEO while you were?
I did. I said, let's get, you know, in the meantime, I got them 160 planes to build. I said, how about the
Qatar?
2 that you're supposed to build for our country? Now, they are different. They're extremely complex, and I'm not going to go into it, but they're not like a normal plane. You know, it's not like building a 747 normal.
I mean, we could put people on the moon before
But let me tell you,
the Boeing Air Force One is
People
done.
knew I was angry at Boeing. A lot of people know. These people know. They're very smart down here. And they suggested if we can do anything at all to help. Because we have 40-year-old planes right now. You know, our Air Force One is actually 2 planes. It's 2 747s. It's
I don't think people know that. 40 years. It's 4 decades old, the current Air
They're
Force
40
One.
years old. They're more than that. I think they're 42 now. I've been saying 40 for 2 years. They're 42. We shouldn't have a 42-year-old plane. And you know what? There's nothing unsafe about it. In many cases, they're just as safe or more safe. They're heavier. You know, they throw out a lot more for the environmentalists out there to turn them. They throw out a little more than a modern engine would throw out. But they're, you know, they're good, but they're 42 years old. And when we landed, I saw the other day, when we landed, I was parked right next to the 747 of Qatar. And we parked next, there was another 747, 2 or 3 of them, which the Arab world has. And when you look at a new 747 and you look at a plane that's 42 years old, not even the same plane, the other ones are bigger and sleeker and sharper, and it doesn't look right. We have a problem with Boeing. Now, again, it's a very complex plane. It's a much different plane than a normal plane would be. Okay. And they're doing a great job. They're coming back, and they're coming back strong. But I'm angry about them for the 2 planes. They should be able to knock them off in no time, and it's, you know, they're not able to do that. And he said, great gentleman, Tamim, he said, I would like to help if you want. I said, how can you help? Well, we happen to have a plane. And I said, well, what do you want to do? He said, you have been, and he doesn't mean me, although I have been good. He means our country has defended them, has done great things for them. They might not be
huge
there.
Base.
Look,
Yeah.
right next to Iran, and he is right next to. He's not like an hour away. Like I flew an hour to one, I flew an hour to here. But that one, you don't have to fly. All you have to do is walk right across the border if you want to. I mean, it's literally touching, right? Right next to. And he said, your country has been very good to us. I would love to do something to help with this situation you have with Air Force One. I said, that's nice. What do you suggest? And he suggested this. And I said, you know what? That's very nice. That's very nice. I appreciate it. What would be the price? He said, there is no price. I said, that's nice. Now, this plane's not for me. This goes to the United States Air Force for whoever is president. And at some point, it'll be like Ronald Reagan. It'll be decommissioned. You know, it's 11 years old.
So it stays until it's decommissioned.
Yeah, it'll be decommissioned because
Yeah.
they won't want it. Plus, they'll have the other 2 planes by that time, and there'll be brand new planes, etc. But I just want to say, it was a radical left story that a lot of people, including you,
I asked the Prime Minister about
But
it
you know what?
specifically.
Yeah,
and
good.
he said, you know, he didn't understand the reaction back home. And, you know, he made that clear.
I think he was insulted, actually. He made a gift to help somebody that has helped them. It was so nice as a gesture. And you know, the people here, to show you how it's crazy, they'd like me to pay $1 billion. I'd rather pay $1 billion and get 10 fighter jets instead of giving $1 billion when it's not necessary.
Mr. President, if you'll stand by.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page.